Subscribe Tag TV YouTube channel and press the notification button.
Why Khalistan map not including any part of Pakistani Punjab, since that part should be more sacred to religious aspirations of Khalistan? Why Khalistanis never mention 1947 genocide of over 250,000 Sikhs, since this partition was demanded by Muslims? Why Khalistani leaders praise Pakistan and say they will defend Pakistan in a war against India? Why do Khalistani leaders in Canada appear with Pakistani diplomats and show their solidarity with them?
We have joined hands. Canadian Sikh community is much more closer to Pakistan than any other country in that area.
Such are the questions arise in context of Terry Milewski report, Khalistan, a project of Pakistan. When we witness Khalistani leaders in Canada saying openly Sikhs join hands with Pakistan, what does that mean? When Khalistani leaders attend Pakistan Independence Day as guest speakers in an event arranged by a conservative senator of Pakistani origin, Ms. Salma Ataullah Jan.
I'd like to extend my sincere thanks to our own Canadian Senator, Salma Ataullah Jan. Salma Ataullah Jan ਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫੇਰ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਰੈਜ਼ੋਲੂਸ਼ਨ ਡੇ ਦੇ ਇਸ ਮੌਕੇ ਦੇ ਉੱਤੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਦੋ ਭਾਈਚਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਇਕੱਠਾ ਕੀਤਾ। ਸੋ ਤੀਸਰਾ ਜੋ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਗੁਲਾਮ ਬਣਾ ਕੇ ਰੱਖਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਉਹ ਦੇਖ ਲਵੇ ਕਿ ਵੀ ਹੈਵ ਜੁਆਇਨਡ ਹੈਂਡਸ। Canadian Sikh community is much more closer to Pakistan than any other country in that area.
The spirit and message of Khalistani leaders are clear that they apparently work for Pakistani project.
It's far more moving when a stateless nation comes and says Happy Pakistan to a nation that already has their home. So ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰੀ ਫਿਰ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਸਟੇਟਲੈਸ ਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਦਾ ਨੁਮਾਇੰਦਾ ਹੋਣ ਦੇ ਨਾਤੇ ਕਹਿਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹੈਪੀ ਪਾਕਿਸਤਾਨ ਡੇ। ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਆਸ ਕਰਦਾ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਦਿਨ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਹੈਪੀ ਖਾਲਿਸਤਾਨ ਮਾਫ ਕਰਨਾ ਖਾਲੀ ਥਾਵਾਂ ਡੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਹਿ ਸਕਦੇ ਹੋ।
Another well-known Khalistani leader wrote a letter to Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan and pledged his support to Pakistan in case India and Pakistan go on war. Terry Milewski is not wrong here in his assertion based on his 35 years experience working on Air India bombing and its aftermath. I'm joined with Dr. Shwindradhar Dwivedi. He's an anesthesiologist and national president, Canada-India Global Forum. Welcome, Dr. Saab. You are from Montreal, and thank you for joining us today. We'll be talking about political correctness in Canada in broader context, as well as this particular paper presented by a very senior journalist, Terry Milewski. So what is your take on this paper, first of all?
Well, I think it's a very remarkable paper. There's a lot of work that's gone into this, and it addresses a very significant topic that is being faced by not just Indo-Canadians, but all Canadians, because this is a matter which doesn't just concern Indo-Canadians, the Sikh community, but it's of great concern to Canadians, to all Canadians in all walks of life. So I think it's a very timely paper, and it's something that deserves to be looked at in detail. And I would urge everyone to please read the report before making up their minds.
So, as I mentioned, some of the Sikh groups, they responded to this paper, and a website appeared. It's called Sikh Scholars Response. Probably you have seen that letter they have published on the website, and it claims signatures from 50 academia, professors, scholars of Sikh background. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that I haven't read that letter, or I have not seen what they have written. But my first response, and it's not really fair because I haven't read the letter, to be fair, but this is not an academic report, number one. So to criticize a report which is a public, in the form of public debate, using academic criteria is technically wrong. Number one. I think to be fair, each individual who would be looking at this subject, I would recommend please read Terry's report. Look at his references. He's given the references at the end of that report, and make up your own minds of what he's saying. Is it valid or not? Instead of relying on a group, on somebody else's opinion. If 50 people decide to put their name on a particular report, what is their interest in putting on a report like this? Otherwise, criticizing for criticism's sake, that's just a game. I mean, there's no validity to that. So that's what I would say on that particular issue.
So, Dr. Dwivedi, I have read the paper written by Terry Milewski, as well as I have read the letter posted on that website. So in this environment, when Terry Milewski says that Khalistan, a project of Pakistan, do you agree with him?
Let's point out a much more important fact, and that is all the demands for Khalistan only center on the Punjab part, which is in India, whereas the majority of the Sikhs' religious sites, historical sites, are in the Pakistan side of the border. If you are looking at this problem historically, I'll just take 2 minutes to elaborate on this. Let's look at some basic facts. Before partition, the Punjab was a mix of Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, other groups. What was the division of the population? 53% were Muslim, 29% were Hindus, 15% were Sikhs. Right? That was the distribution of the population. Where did the Sikhs come to at partition? They came to India. They didn't go to Afghanistan. But they didn't go to Iran. They didn't go to India. They came to India because that was their home. And India openly accepted the Sikhs, right? Now, they claim, Khalistani proponents claim that they're very badly treated and things have happened, and no doubt the pogroms after Mrs. Gandhi was assassinated did take place, and that's a very sorry state in the history of India. 3,000-4,000 innocent people were killed. But hold on, historically, 250,000 Sikhs were killed at partition and the time in the pogroms that happened there. Nobody talks about this in the Sikh community. That's a real genocide. Not that the loss of life, any loss of life is horrible, but 250,000 versus 4,000, there's a hell of a difference there. Now, people claim that Sikhs, are badly treated in India and Punjab, so they need their own homeland. Claiming that, let's look at some of the facts. We've had a person of Sikh origin as the president of the country, Dr. Zayal Singh. We've had a Sikh Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, many judges of the Supreme Court. Most of our army and navy commanders have been Sikh. Being 2% of the population, their contribution in the military, economically, socially, culturally, are far outweigh the percentage they are in population because they're hard work. They've always been a very hard-working population. Now, if you have a Khalistan, what is it that you're complaining about? Can you name one person in Pakistan's? They've had Sikhs. There were 2 million at partition. They're less than 10,000 today, right? Which Sikh politician in Pakistan comes to mind? Right? But when do we see the pro-Khalistani groups demonstrating and calling Pakistan out when Gurdwaras are attacked, when Pakistani women are raped, and there was forced conversion of Sikhs to Islam? I haven't seen any demonstrations from the Sikh community on that, right? Have you? So that in itself points out to me that there's a very strong nexus between Pakistan and the Khalistani movement. I mean, if you are talking about a Khalistan state, Punjab for Sikhs, as one of the Rajas, why are the most holy sites not involved in that? Because they're in Pakistan. Why is the Khalistani movement not asking for Lahore, the capital of Maharaja Ranjit Singh in the Sikh Empire? Why are they not asking for the birthplace of Guru Nanak? Because in my humble opinion, if they asked for that, they cannot make that sort of call in Pakistan. They would be severely curtailed in support. So there's definitely a lot of this, these sort of factors which play very much, or which sided with Terry Milewski's report.
A website, Sikh Scholars Response, published a letter condemning MacDonald Laurier Institute report. Khalistan, a project of Pakistan. 50 signatories of that letter include few Canadian Sikh academia and rest from US, Europe and other parts of the world. But Terry Milewski never said in his paper that the whole Sikh community is bad. He mentioned a very tiny percentage of extremists are playing this extremist agenda.
This sort of political correctness is absolutely wrong, and we've suffered from it for at least 2 or 3 decades in Canada and in all Western democracies. Okay, let me. I don't know if you're familiar, but Edmund Burke, the Irish politician, had a very nice phrase, and he said that all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And in today's world, I'd say for good people to do nothing. Well, you know what? When you go to a Gurdwara or a Sikh function, and convicted terrorists are being honored, you may be, and you don't speak up against it, you are tactically then supporting those terrorists. That does not mean that the community has bad. I'll have to say, roti or beti ki sawal hai. The link between Hindus and Sikhs is roti beti ki sawal hai. हम लोग शादी आपस में करते हैं, खाना बैठ के खाते हैं. You go to any Gurdwara, you go to any temple, you will see Sikhs and Hindus in both. Sikhs come to Hindu temples to pray, or Hindus go to Sikh temples, mata tekne ke liye jate hain. Right? That's the relationship. 99% of Sikhs in any country, not just Canada, are extremely hardworking, successful, law-abiding citizens, right? No, that 1%, which is causing the problems, right? That is maligning the whole community. At no point in this report does Terry Milewski say that he's maligning Sikhs. So that is patently false. If that's what they're saying, because I haven't read the letter, right? He's saying that a small percentage of people who have been, let's say, engaged in illegal activities are wrong and should be held to account. And let's look at the facts. The Khalistani movement, pretty well in Punjab, is a dead movement. right? In the last election, who won? Captain Amrinder Singh, who's a first of all, is a congressperson. So the Congress won despite the history of the Congress led pogroms against Sikhs in Delhi in the past, right? He's a very staunch anti-Khalistani person, right? The more than that, most of the seats that where Sikhs had majorities in Punjab went to Captain Amrinder Singh's Congress party. What was the vote share of the Shimana Akali Dal splinter group, which asked for Khalistan? 0.34%. 0.34%. So where is the support in India and Punjab for pro-Khalistani movement? There is none. The fact of the matter is that this has been an issue in Canada, in UK, in USA for expatriate Sikhs to have a role to play. Okay, I don't know what their financial situation is, but it is obviously not of concern in India, not of concern in the state of Punjab. They're not willing to fight this battle in Pakistan, where most of the sites of the Sikh empire were, right? Because Pakistan would not permit it. India, being a democracy, permits debate, and Canada, being a democracy, permits you to express your point of view, which is fine. Don't engage in terrorist activities. That's okay. You do what you would like to do. Demonstrate, have placards, whatever. But please, 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 my request to every thinking person: do not back terrorists. Someone who bombed Air India and killed 329 innocent people does not deserve your respect and does not deserve your obeisance in a Gurdwara. This is not a place for him. It's as simple as that.
So, I have seen the names of all signatories in that letter. I haven't seen anyone's criticizing human rights abuses in Pakistan, particularly Sikh and Hindu girls' forced conversion, their forced marriages in Pakistan. But in this letter, they also state that they happen to condemn human rights abuses in Pakistan. But I don't hear anything criticizing Pakistan in terms of persecution of Sikhs and Hindus there, neither from Mr. Pannu nor from other Khalistani leader. So why don't they criticize human rights abuses in Pakistan?
That's an excellent question. I wish I had the answer. I think you have to ask the people who are signatories to that report. But this has become a growing trend, not just in Canada, but in all liberal democracies. There seems to be a feeling that, you know what, everybody's belief system is above reproach. You accept it and you move on. Well, wait a minute. Not every belief system is okay, right? When you say that, for instance, when do you see people complaining about the lack of rights in many Muslim origin countries? There are abuses still today, but nobody talks about it. It's okay, right? Nobody talks about, like you were mentioning, in Pakistan. Why aren't people demonstrating in the streets in terms of the Uyghur Muslims in China? So this whole debate, depending on what you want to discuss, is a pick and choose type debate. This suits my argument. So here I will speak on human rights. This doesn't suit my argument because it's a friend of mine or a country that is leaving. So I won't discuss that part. I mean, what sort of nonsense is this, right? I mean, just recently we've had the execution of the wrestler in Iran, right? Where are the people in the streets about that? Where are the people in the streets about that? When you talk about some 80-year-old person marrying a 6-year-old girl, and it's in the news, where are our feminist sisters and people who are talking about human rights for children, right? They talk about child trafficking. This is blatant abuse of a child. But I don't see the people in the street about this issue because it doesn't concern them. It's far away. And this is wrong. Pick your battles on the basis of whether there's abuse or not abuse, not because it suits your political agenda, right? That's what I would request everyone to examine their conscience and speak on issues of what is right and wrong, and not what suits their political agenda.
When it
I'll stop
comes to Canadian Sikh politicians, some are even our ministers, they criticize India's any step what they think is human right abuse. But even our Canadian Sikh politicians, they don't criticize Pakistan's persecution of Sikh, Hindu, and Christian communities. What would you say on this situation?
Well, my father once told me that in a democracy, only two things count. Either you provide money for campaigns or you bring voters to vote. And unfortunately, it's been made obvious to me on many occasions that if a group of people can bring money and votes to a party, then it's people get silenced a fair bit, and they don't want to speak out. And the best example of this would be the change in Ralph Goodale's time of the report on CSIS report. The Liberals did that because a lot of their funding from the National Post articles is coming from BC. Fine. But the Conservative Party had a motion criticizing that, and I believe Aaron O'Toole was one of the sponsors of that motion, and yet that motion didn't see the light of day. But the pro-Khalistani group in the Sikh community led an email and telephone campaign, and that motion criticizing Justin Trudeau's government, or our government at the time, Liberal government, was quietly withdrawn. So why was that? Because the perception, it seems to be in Canadian politics, that the pro-Khalistani group in Canada can deliver you both money and votes in significant numbers in certain swing ridings, and therefore you cannot go against what they are saying. Now that's wrong. That is just blatantly wrong. That means that our democracy is being held hostage to certain interest groups. This is what it points out to me. Now, how can, let's say, if Sikhs represent 500,000 people of Sikh origin are in Canada, if this group is maybe 10, 15, 20,000, I don't know the exact number, but how can such a small number of people dictate what the two major federal parties are discussing for the benefit of all Canadians and dictate policy? And I won't go with Jagmeet Singh and NDP. I've never seen him criticize anything. I mean, he just criticized the police for something which he shouldn't have in Toronto that happened. But I mean, that sort of thing is just blatantly wrong. Democracy is supposed to be a situation where you look at the best interests of the majority of your citizens. Right? That's the fundamental basis of democracy. Not to say the majority is always right. And there you have to use your judgment and say, well, this is not right, so we're not going to support this even though the majority want it. That also is a fact of democracy. But I have never seen such a small number of people dictating to major political parties what their policies should be. I have not.
So what do you see the future of politics in Canada in this environment? Do you see any hope in terms of any change that the political parties could come out of this tribalism kind of a thing?
Well, you're probably aware, more than I am being a journalist, that there has been a move to discuss proportional representation and change the system of the first past the post system that we have. That is one thing which unfortunately has not been very, very beneficial to both Israel and Italy, where this is the system, because again you have issues with how the system works. But I think the biggest task is that Canadian politicians and Canadian political parties must educate themselves on issues and look at the broader picture and look at something that, instead of being looking at it as a selfish venture, how many votes will I get, how much money comes into the party's coffers, look at it, is this beneficial for Canada? Is this what the majority of my constituents would want me to say? Right? I mean, I think if you discuss some of the statements people have made in the past, they're responding to a small number of constituents in their riding. The job of an elected MP or MLA or MPP is to represent the majority of his constituents, not a small number of them. And if that viewpoint is not the viewpoint of the majority of his constituents, then he should bloody well find out what is the majority viewpoint in that constituency he represents, because that's the oath that they take, to represent the majority of their constituents, both in Parliament and in what they say and what they do. They're not there to represent just the small, very small, most vocal members of their constituency. So maybe one of the positive changes I would recommend is, if you're an MP or an MPP, please know do polling. The technology is there. It costs very little. Poll your constituents on a particular issue before you issue a public statement or take a public stand in Parliament. That might be a good way to know what people expect from you, instead of relying on the 5-10 people who come in your office and raise particular issues.
So in the end, I like to know more about this reality that in this environment of political correctness and appeasement politics, do you really see any chance or any hope on the ground for any change?
Well, Tahir bhai, it's very simple. You get the government that you deserve, right? If individual Canadians, and I'm not just indicating, but individual Canadians do not take an interest in how things are done, do not show up to riding association meetings, do not educate themselves in the political process, they have no one to blame but themselves. Somebody is going to fill that political vacuum, right? And if you're going to say, well, I'm too tired to go to that meeting. Oh, I don't want to sign the check for this party or this particular candidate. Well, then, we're going to have issues like this. We have elections where 52%, sometimes even less than 50% show up to vote on an election night. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. In a democracy is a two-way street. It gives citizens certain responsibilities, okay, and care, and we can change the government when we're not happy with the government. That's our right as citizens. But it is also our responsibility as citizens of Canada, okay, to participate in the process. You cannot just accept the goodies that are coming from the country and not accept your responsibilities as a citizen to be informed of the situation that's going on and to actively participate. If you do not participate in the process, you are leaving the field open to those who will. And trust me, people with a particular agenda, whether it's economic, social, political, whatever, are going to participate in the process, and they will dominate the political discussion and the political landscape. This is what happens. And it comes back to Edmund Burke. If people who are knowledgeable, who are interested, don't participate, well, the fringe will. And the fringe has, and they have been dominating our political process. Whether it's conservatives, whether it's liberals, whether it's NDP, every political party who the support is based on people who are extremely active, who take part in the process. You sit at home, sorry, you don't have your say, but then don't complain. Don't complain afterwards, they're not representing my viewpoint. Well, where were you when it came time to give your political contribution or participate in the meeting to put forward your viewpoint? right? Put forward your viewpoint. Speak to the MP, speak to the MLA's office or whatever, and say this is right or this is wrong. If you don't participate in the process, for God's sake, then don't criticize what the process is.
So finally, Dr. Dwivedi, if you think we are missing any important message or any important content in our conversation, what you and I just had, kindly say so.
I would summarize what I finished with, and that is that my humble request to everyone who listens and watches your program, please take the time to participate in the process of democracy. Democracy is dependent on the active participation of its citizenry. If the citizens abdicate that responsibility, then we are to blame for what the political statements and policies come out. It's as simple as that. If you don't participate in a democracy, then don't criticize what's happening. And right and wrong decisions are taken because there's too much influence by small interest groups. Apart from the Khalistani issue, small interest groups are dominating the politics, not just here, also in the United States and France, Germany, India, all sorts of countries. And it happens because the majority of the citizens do not take the time to participate in the process and speak out when evil happens. Evil only happens when good people do nothing. It's as simple as that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dwivedi, for joining us today. Thank you for watching Candid Talk with Tahir, Gora and Dr. Dwivedi.
Subscribe TAG TV YouTube channel and press the notification button.